The next day, Team 7 was back where every new Chunin started, D-rank work. It felt almost absurd after the Land of Waves. After blood and mist, and the kind of killing intent that made your body lock up like prey. Going from that to pulling weeds, repainting fences, helping shopkeepers with deliveries, it should have felt like a joke. But Naruto didn't treat it like one. They did a couple missions a day. The routine was simple. Meet Kakashi, get assigned, finish fast, report back, then train until their limbs shook. Kakashi didn't go easy on them just because the missions were low risk. If anything, he was more demanding. He made them take the work seriously, move efficiently, communicate clearly, and keep their awareness up even when the job was find a lost dog or escort a merchant's cart across town. Because Kakashi kept repeating the same thing in his maddeningly calm voice. Complacency is how shinobi die. Naruto understood that now, and he understood something else, too. The village ran on these small missions. They were the grease in the gears, the invisible work that kept people safe and fed and calm enough to sleep at night. A ninja wasn't just someone who killed. A ninja was someone the village relied on. So Naruto asked for permission from the Hokage, not to slack off, not to chase glory, but to help. He went to the mission desk and requested to take extra D ranks solo, simple ones, low risk, the kind that didn't need a full team. At first, the response was stiff, suspicious. Some villagers looked at him like he'd stolen the forms. But Hiruzen had approved it. Kakashi had backed it. So Naruto started doing them. And then he started doing something that would have sounded insane to anyone who only knew old Naruto. He started sending clones, not for the flashy stuff, not for fights, for errands, for work nobody wanted. One clone helped the elderly in the market carry heavy bags. Another cleaned graffiti off a wall. Another spent an hour walking a lost toddler back to her mother. Another climbed rooftops to patch leaks after a storm. Naruto didn't announce it. He didn't brag. He didn't stand there demanding applause. He just did it. And the village noticed anyway. Slowly at first. A shopkeeper who used to frown at him now hesitated before doing it. A mother who used to pull her kid away now paused and offered a stiff nod. A carpenter who'd once snapped, "Don't touch," now grunted, "Thanks," when Naruto's clone held a beam steady. Tiny cracks, tiny shifts. But to Naruto, it mattered more than a dozen cheers. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was proof. Proof that if he kept showing up, kept helping, kept making himself useful, not as a weapon, but as part of the village, then maybe one day the village would stop seeing the monster first. And that helped him mentally more than he expected. Because for the first time, he wasn't training just to prove something. He was training to protect something he actually felt connected to. He met new people through it, too. People he'd never spoken to before because they'd never had a reason to speak to him. He learned where the village stored emergency supplies, which streets flooded when it rained, which roofs were weakest in winter. He learned names, faces, habits. He started to understand Konoha as more than the place that hates me. It became his. That didn't erase the older bitterness, but it gave it less room to breathe. His training evolved alongside the missions. The clone system he'd built didn't stay static. It couldn't. He kept finding gaps, holes in his skill set that could get him killed if he left them alone. So he added another clone. Sensory techniques. It was the one thing that kept biting him. The thugs by the riverbank. The way he hadn't felt Kakashi approaching that first time. The way Haku and Zabuza moved like they belonged to the environment itself. Naruto didn't want to rely on luck or instinct alone anymore. The sensory clone became obsessed in the way only Naruto could be. Relentless, stubborn, almost rude about it. It studied the basics, how chakra signatures felt, how they differed from person to person, how to notice subtle pressure changes in the air, how to catch the moment a presence tried to hide itself. Naruto couldn't do what a true sensorin did. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Not naturally. But he could build something functional. He learned to sit still and listen with his chakra, not ears, not eyes, but that internal sense that felt like tension in the skin. He practiced finding his own clones without looking. He practiced tracking Sakura and Sasuke's movement patterns by the faint shifts in the environment when they trained. It was slow progress, frustrating progress, but it was progress, and everything else kept climbing. His speed was increasing steadily. Weights on, weights off, sprint intervals, explosive footwork drills, reaction training. When he took the vest off, he felt light in a way that almost scared him. Like the world had slowed down a fraction. His political and historical knowledge had become something a lot of Chunin didn't bother with. Not because he was suddenly wise, but because he'd learned missions weren't just about strength. They were about context, motives, leverage, reputation, what your village looked like to outsiders. It mattered. His elemental training moved from paper tearing into practical application. He'd started imbuing wind chakra into kunai, first in tiny doses that did almost nothing, then in sharper, cleaner streams that made the edge sing. The effect wasn't dramatic like a jutsu yet, but it was real. Deeper cuts, cleaner penetration, the sense that the blade extended a fraction beyond metal when his control was right. He liked it. It felt efficient. Like the wind wasn't power yet, but it was becoming precision. His sealing work had taken a leap that even surprised him. He'd always known paper tags were a weakness. Paper could be torn. Paper could be burned. Paper could be slapped off. So he'd pushed. He'd refined the movement seal until he could apply it with touch, chakra, and formula imprinting directly through his palm. No tag required. It was delicate work, like writing a perfect symbol while someone shoved your arm, but he'd done it. He could land a hand on an opponent and stamp the formula into them. Even more valuable, he'd found a way to leave it behind without staying in contact. He'd feed a dense chunk of chakra into the imprint, an anchor. The seal would hold for a breath, a blink, a fraction of a second while he let go and moved. That fraction was everything. It was the difference between being too slow and being on time. It wasn't perfect. He knew the weakness. Stronger opponents could brute force through it. Massive chakra could smother it. It was a tool, not a win button. But Naruto loved tools. Tools meant options. His taijutsu kept shifting constantly. He stole movement ideas shamelessly, from Haku's fluid evasions, from Zabuza's brutal commitment, from Sasuke's sharp angles, from Kakashi's economy. But he wasn't copying. He was blending, trimming, smoothing. He was trying to build a style that didn't have a next obvious move. Not random. Random was sloppy, flowing. A strike that became a feint, that became a grab, that became a step, that became a kick. Everything able to pivot into something else. No pause. No pattern. He wanted to make prediction harder. He wanted to make even a Sharingan user hesitate. Not because he was faster than their eyes, but because the choice tree in front of them was too wide to narrow down in time. His eye training crawled forward, steady and stubborn. He could read small details at distance more quickly now. He could catch peripheral motion without snapping his head as often. It wasn't miraculous, but it was real, and he was debating using 3 clones for it. One for clarity drills, one for peripheral reaction, one for motion tracking, because speed of improvement would jump. But the mental load, that was the problem. When too many clones worked on brain-heavy tasks, the feedback hit like a headache made of memories. He'd learned to stagger dispels, to let the information settle. If he did 3 eye training clones, he'd have to dispel them at different times, with breath breaks in between, or he'd turn his own brain into soup. Naruto sighed one night, sitting on the academy roof with his notebook open, and wrote a line under the eye training section. One step at a time. Don't get greedy. The days rolled forward. D-ranks. Training. More D-ranks. More training. Kakashi pushing them, not with harshness, but with that quiet expectation that made you feel like failure was a choice you were making on purpose. Each night, he continued his brutal training, the weights becoming part of his body. His speed climbed back up to what it was when he started. Sakura changed, too. Not dramatically, but noticeably. She didn't hit Naruto as often. She didn't snap at him for breathing wrong. She still had her temper, still had her pride, but there was more restraint now. More awareness that they'd all come back from something that could have killed them, and that maybe treating Naruto like dirt didn't make sense anymore. Sasuke stayed Sasuke, quiet, sharp, focused, but there were tiny shifts there as well. The way he didn't dismiss Naruto's plans outright. The way he sometimes watched Naruto's footwork a second longer than necessary. The way the rivalry still existed, but had stopped feeling like a game and started feeling like mutual pressure. Like they were both climbing the same wall and refusing to fall first. Naruto didn't mind that. He just kept moving. Then the day of registration arrived. The air felt different from the moment Naruto woke. Like the village itself had taken a breath and was holding it. Konoha was hosting. That meant foreign shinobi walking their streets, measuring them, judging them. Naruto stood near the registration building early, arms crossed, leaning against a post like he was casual. Like his stomach wasn't tight. Like his mind wasn't running through everything he'd learned, checking each piece of it like gear before a mission. He went over the basics. Forms, counterforms, how to break Jinjutsu, how to keep calm when fear hit. He went over the memory of Haku again, not because he wanted to suffer, but because he refused to be caught off guard by his own guilt in the middle of an exam. He remembered Haku's face. He remembered the lesson. Human life is real. It doesn't vanish when you stop looking. Naruto exhaled slowly. He'd learned how to live with it. Not fully, maybe never fully, but enough. Enough that it wouldn't paralyze him. Not if he found himself having to do something like that again. He was still in that internal loop when a familiar voice cut through the air, bright and urgent. Naruto, let's get going. Naruto looked up to see Sakura waving him over, her expression more open than it used to be. She wasn't smiling like everything was fine, but she wasn't scowling either. There was a strange warmth there that hadn't existed before the waves. Naruto pushed off the post and walked toward her, adjusting his headband out of habit. About time, he said, but there was no bite in it. Sakura huffed, then her eyes narrowed slightly. You were early on purpose, weren't you? Naruto's grin appeared, small, sharp. Maybe. She shook her head like she was annoyed, but it didn't stick. Sasuke's coming. Naruto glanced past her, scanning the crowd and the building entrance, senses flicking outward automatically. He could feel the village's usual background noise, footsteps, voices, chakra signatures like faint heat in the air, and underneath it, the quiet presence of something else. Foreign shinobi, different patterns, different weights in the air. Naruto's fingers flexed once, then settled. All right, he said, voice calmer than he felt. Let's go sign up. He started walking with Sakura toward the building, mind already shifting into that mission-ready focus. Chunin exams weren't just a test. They were a stage. And Naruto Uzumaki had decided a long time ago that he wasn't going to stay backstage forever. Sasuke hadn't changed much. If anything, he'd become more distant. Land of Waves hadn't softened him. It hadn't made him friendlier. If anything, it sharpened that quiet intensity into something even colder, like he'd decided that letting people in was a mistake he wouldn't repeat. He trained, he watched, he listened when it mattered, and the rest of the time he lived inside his own head, a place none of them were allowed to enter. Naruto didn't push it. Pushing Sasuke was like pushing a blade. Eventually, you just cut your own hand. Sakura waved him over, impatience and excitement tangled together in her voice. Naruto returned it with a small smile and a lazy wave of his own. Yep, I'm coming, Sakura. He fell into step beside them, and they headed into the exam center. The air already thick with that nervous energy that always clung to crowds of shinobi. Foreign headbands flashed between shoulders. Different clothes, different posture, different ways of standing that screamed different villages. Naruto's senses, still rough compared to true sensorin, picked up faint impressions anyway, like the air had layers. As they climbed the stairs, Naruto felt it. Something off. Not a trap he could point at, but a pressure in the space itself, like the building was trying to lie to his eyes. When they reached this second floor, the hallway ahead carried a sign reading third floor. Sakura's gaze flicked up, then sideways, quick as a blink. Sasuke didn't even slow. Naruto kept his expression neutral. Jinjutsu, simple, but clever. The kind designed to catch out the sloppy ones and embarrass them before they ever made it to the real sign-in. They didn't call it out. Not yet. Better to stay under the radar for a little while and see what the test was actually measuring. Up ahead, a commotion had already started. Two shinobi, older than the majority of genin, posture too relaxed for people who were nervous, were posted by a door, arms folded like bouncers. In front of them, a boy with a black bowl cut and a bright green spandex suit was lying back on the floor, having just been shoved back. His clothes were so loud they practically insulted the hallway. One of the guards, spiky-haired and smug, leaned forward. Give it up. You plan to take on the Chunin exams with only that amount of strength. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. The tone was too casual for real hostility. Too rehearsed. Like they'd said it 100 times today. A girl stepped in quickly to help the boy up. She had black hair in two buns and wore a Chinese-style dress that looked way too clean for a fight. Her hands were steady when she offered him support. Please let us through, she said, voice controlled. The guard smirked like he'd been waiting for that. You're just a little kid. Then he backhanded her. The slap cracked through the hall. The girl stumbled a half step, eyes flashing, but she didn't fall. The spiky-haired shinobi leaned closer, grinning wider. You think the Chunin exams are easy? We're just thinning out those that will fail anyway. Naruto exhaled through his nose, irritation rising like heat. Not because he didn't understand the lesson, he did, but because there was a difference between a test and cruelty, and that line had just been crossed for no reason except to flex authority. Sasuke stepped forward before Naruto could, voice flat, and sharp. "Let us through," he said, and removed the Jinjutsu. The guards' smirks didn't vanish, but their eyes sharpened. One tilted his head. "So you noticed?" "Not just me." Sasuke didn't bother looking proud. He just stated it like fact. "It was easy for our whole team." He glanced back over his shoulder. Sakura nodded once, small and confident. Naruto's mouth morphed into a grin. Sasuke was using them as proof, not as decoration. That was something unexpected. The spiky-haired guard's grin widened. "Not bad, kid. But all you did was see through it." He launched into a kick, fast and clean, aimed at Sasuke's chest. Sasuke met it with his own. He didn't go full power. Naruto could tell by the restraint in his hip rotation, but it was still enough to show dominance. Sasuke's kick drove straight through the guard's line, forcing the man to brace or be knocked backward. They were a breath away from impact when a green blur snapped into the space between them. The bowl-cut boy caught both kicks, one hand on Sasuke's ankle, one hand on the guard's shin. No struggle, no shaking. Like he'd intercepted two children sparring in a courtyard. The hallway went quiet for a heartbeat. Naruto's brows lifted. The speed was impressive, but what got his attention wasn't the catch. It was the weight. His eye training had taught him to look for small details first. The angle of a stance, the tension in a tendon, the way fabric pulled around a joint. On the green-suited boy's legs, just above his ankles, were thick bands, almost hidden by his large orange socks. Weights, not the academy training vest kind. These were dense and compact, the kind you didn't wear unless you were either insane or seriously strong. Naruto's pulse picked up, not from fear, but from recognition. Someone else was doing what he was doing, forcing the body to adapt by making it suffer on purpose. Sasuke's expression tightened too, but for a different reason. That kind of strength, catching his kick with one arm like it was nothing, was the kind of strength Sasuke respected and hated in equal measure. From behind, a cool voice scoffed. "What happened to the plan?" Naruto glanced over. A boy stood there with dark hair and pale eyes that looked right through people. His gaze was sharp, judgmental, and familiar in the worst way. Byakugan, just like Hinata's, but colder. The girl with buns, still rubbing the cheek that had been hit, sighed like she'd expected this. Neji. So that was Neji Hyuga. Naruto had heard about him, the top genin from last year's graduation, and one of if not the strongest genin in the Leaf Village. The green-suited boy released both legs, then marched forward like the world had already decided he would. He walked straight past the guards and stopped in front of Sakura with an intensity that felt completely unearned. He thrust his thumb up dramatically. "My name is Rock Lee, so yours must be Sakura." Sakura blinked. How on earth did he know that? Lee leaned closer, eyes burning with absolute sincerity. "Let's go out together." Naruto almost laughed. He didn't, but it was close, more a sharp breath than a sound. The timing, the bluntness, the complete lack of awareness. It was like watching someone sprint off a cliff with confidence. He'd been like that once. No wonder people laughed at him. Sakura's face twisted instantly. "No way. You're lame and you're dressed for the circus." Lee deflated in real time, shoulders drooping like someone had unplugged him. Naruto finally let out a small chuckle under his breath. He'd been rejected enough times to recognize that particular kind of emotional damage. The Byakugan wielder stepped forward now, his attention sliding past Naruto like Naruto wasn't even a person. His pale gaze locked on Sasuke. "Hey you," he said. "What's your name?" Naruto's smile stayed on his face as if it was unsurprising. Of course, the Uchiha got the spotlight. Always. Sasuke didn't give him the satisfaction of answering immediately. "Maybe you should introduce yourself first if you want to know." His eyes narrowed. "Neji Hyuga." "Sasuke Uchiha." Sasuke gave the smallest nod, barely acknowledgement, then turned as if the interaction had already stopped being worth his time. Sakura followed him, still looking mildly offended by Lee's existence. Naruto lingered half a second longer, studying them. Lee's posture, Neji's stance, the girl's balanced footing, the subtle way her hands hovered near hidden weapons. Allies. In the future, they were ninja of the leaf. But now, opponents, definitely. The kind you didn't forget. A sharp voice snapped at him. "What are you looking at?" Naruto turned to the girl with buns. Her eyes were fierce, like she was daring him to say something stupid. Naruto could feel Neji's attention shift too, the slightest tightening in the air as his Byakugan focus sharpened. Naruto didn't react like he used to, with a shout or a grin meant to provoke. Instead, he did something quieter. He sank chakra into his legs. Not a burst like a sprint, but a clean, controlled compression, coiling muscle and chakra together, then releasing it in one smooth motion. Neji's posture changed instantly, defensive reflex snapping on. But Naruto didn't attack. He didn't even move toward them. He simply disappeared and reappeared at the far end of the hallway beside Sasuke and Sakura, as if he'd always been there. "Nothing much," Naruto said casually, like he hadn't just crossed the distance in a blink. Behind them, Lee's eyes narrowed, catching the weight bands on Naruto's limbs now that he was closer. The sight hit him like a bell. Another one. Another shinobi training their body under pressure, just like him. Lee's expression flickered, uncertainty, then interest, then a bright, intense focus that made Naruto's skin prickle slightly. Not fear, competition. Niji's gaze stayed hard. Tintin's irritation didn't fade either, but it quieted into wary attention. Sasuke, meanwhile, didn't look back. He just kept walking, shoulders set like the building itself was an obstacle he planned to carve through. Sakura leaned forward, lowering her voice as they approached the stairwell that would lead to the real third floor. "That Jinjutsu was obvious," she murmured, sounding pleased with herself. Naruto hummed. It was meant to be. Sasuke's voice was barely more than air. They wanted the impatient ones to expose themselves. Naruto's grin returned, faint and sharp. "They'll fail anyways when we become Chunin." Somewhere behind them, Rock Lee watched the backs of Team 7 with a new kind of attention, thumbs still half raised, as if he'd just seen something he'd been waiting for. But it wasn't Naruto, even though he was like him. "Go on ahead," Lee muttered to his team. Team 7 continued on and climbed the last stretch toward the real third floor, the hallway widening into a long corridor lined with doors and bulletin boards. The air up here felt heavier, less civilian, more shinobi. There were scuff marks on the floor that didn't belong to janitors. Old chips in the paint that looked suspiciously like kunai scratches. Even the lighting felt harsher, like it didn't want anyone to feel comfortable. Naruto kept to the back of their little triangle without meaning to. Not hiding, just watching. Letting Sasuke take point. Letting Sakura flank. Letting his own senses skim the crowd like fingertips over water. He caught little things. A group from sand walking too quietly. A girl from mist whose gaze never stopped moving. Two shinobi who stood apart from everyone else with the relaxed posture of people who didn't fear being challenged. And then he felt it, an intent that wasn't hostile in the usual way. It was focused, bright, like a spotlight. Naruto glanced sideways. Rock Lee. Lee had peeled away from his team and was walking after them with the determination of someone marching toward destiny. His fists were clenched, but not in anger. More like excitement so intense it needed containment. "Sasuke Uchiha," Lee called out, voice ringing down the corridor. Sasuke didn't turn at first. He kept walking like he'd misheard. Like he didn't acknowledge challenges from strangers who dressed like that. Lee sped up, cutting across the corridor until he was suddenly in front of them, bowing so sharply it looked like he might snap in half. "Please fight me." Sakura blinked. "Huh?" Naruto's mouth twitched, but he didn't laugh this time. Lee's sincerity was too intense to be funny. It was almost unsettling. Sasuke finally stopped. His eyes were cool, narrowed just enough to show irritation. "No," Lee straightened, somehow looking even more earnest. "Please, I must test myself against you." Sasuke took one step to the side, as if Lee were a piece of furniture. "I said no." Lee moved with him, blocking again. "If you refuse, I will consider it fear. A coward too scared to fight me." Sakura's eyebrow twitched. "Excuse me." Sasuke's gaze sharpened, and Naruto could feel the shift in him like a blade sliding free of its sheath. Pride, pure, sharp. Lee had said the wrong word. Sasuke exhaled. "Fine." Sakura's eyes widened. "Sasuke, wait." Naruto stayed quiet. He didn't step forward. He didn't argue. He could already tell where this was going, and more importantly, he could already tell Sasuke wasn't going to be talked out of it. Lee's eyes lit up. "Thank you." They moved without announcement, just drifted into an open space in the corridor where people naturally gave them room. It happened instinctively. Shinobi smelt conflict like wolves smelt blood. Naruto hung back with Sakura at the edge of the circle, arms loose, eyes sharp. He didn't plan to interfere unless he had to. This was Sasuke's fight. Lee settled into a stance, feet angled, hands open. His posture looked simple, but there was a tension under it, coiled strength, disciplined balance. Sasuke faced him, shoulders relaxed, chin slightly down. His own stance was tighter, more traditional. Ready to strike, ready to slip away. "Let's begin," Lee said softly, and then he was gone. Not vanished, moved. A forward burst that ate distance instantly, his footwork crisp, almost weightless despite the heavy bands at his ankles. He didn't lead with a punch. He led with pressure, closing space, forcing Sasuke to react. Sasuke did. He pivoted, sliding out of the direct line, and snapping a kick toward Lee's ribs as Lee passed. Lee's forearm rose like a shield, catching the kick cleanly. The impact echoed, and Lee twisted with it, trying to trap Sasuke's leg for a throw. Sasuke yanked his leg free and spun into a second kick. Higher, faster, aimed for Lee's head. Lee ducked under it and answered with a straight punch that should have landed. Sasuke shifted an inch. The fist skimmed his cheek, close enough that Naruto saw a strand of hair lift from the pressure. Sakura inhaled sharply. Lee smiled, wide, thrilled. Your speed is incredible. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Compliments from opponents didn't soothe him. They just sounded like condescension. They traded again. Lee pressed in with a flurry, jab, palm strike, low sweep, moving like a wave, each attack flowing into the next. Sasuke met it with tight counters, his body snapping into efficient blocks and dodges. He wasn't being overwhelmed. If anything, Sasuke was keeping up, maybe even edging Lee in raw speed for the first few exchanges. But the difference started to show in the third. Lee's footwork adjusted, subtle at first. He began stepping not where Sasuke was, but where Sasuke wanted to be. He wasn't just reacting. He was setting the rhythm. Sasuke tried to break it by rushing, an aggressive burst forward, shoulder angled, kunai flashing. Lee slipped aside and let Sasuke's momentum carry him past. Lee's heel hooked behind Sasuke's ankle and tugged. Sasuke's balance snapped sideways. He corrected fast, twisting mid-fall, planting a hand, flipping his body back upright. But Lee was already there, waiting, hand open, ready to strike. Lee's palm hit Sasuke's chest, not full force, more like a reminder. A tap that still drove Sasuke back 2 steps. The corridor murmured. Sasuke's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked, and in the next breath his Sharingan bloomed, red, spinning, reading. Naruto felt the shift in Sasuke's focus immediately. The way his gaze sharpened, the way his posture settled, like he'd turned a dial inside his skull. Naruto got ready for some practice of his own. This fight was about to reach its climax, and he'd be damned if he didn't use this to further train his eyes. Lee's smile widened again. So those are the Sharingan. He moved. Faster. Sasuke's eyes tracked him now, keeping the blur in focus. Sasuke stepped in, intercepting Lee's angle with a precise counterpunch aimed at the solar plexus. Lee tilted his torso just enough to let it miss, and his own fist snapped toward Sasuke's ribs. Sasuke blocked. Lee's other hand came in from the side. Sasuke blocked that too. Then Lee's knee rose suddenly, sharp and direct, aiming for Sasuke's stomach. Sasuke's elbow dropped to catch it, cleanly. But Lee had already changed direction. The knee wasn't the attack. It was bait. Lee's foot planted, and he spun behind Sasuke, arm looping around Sasuke's waist. Sasuke's Sharingan saw it. Sasuke's body reacted, but not quite fast enough. Lee lifted. Sasuke's feet left the ground, the world tilting. Lee's throw was controlled. Perfect form, perfect leverage, the kind of movement hammered into muscle memory until it became law. Sasuke twisted midair, trying to land on his feet. Lee didn't let him. Lee followed the throw, staying attached, and slammed Sasuke down in a way that pinned him for just a heartbeat longer than a heartbeat should last. Sasuke hit the floor hard enough to rattle the corridor. Sakura flinched. Sasuke shoved up instantly, furious. His Sharingan spun faster, reading Lee's shoulders, hips, breath, trying to predict the next movement before it existed. And he did start predicting. Sasuke began timing his counters better. He began slipping around Lee's attacks by fractions instead of inches. He landed a clean hit, an elbow to Lee's side that made Lee grunt. But Lee's expression didn't change. He was still excited, still holding back. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Sasuke charged again, trying to overwhelm Lee with speed and aggression, kunai forcing Lee to respect range. Lee's hands moved like water, redirecting, deflecting, never meeting force head-on. Sasuke's Sharingan tracked every motion, but Lee's body didn't follow the usual logic. His transitions were too smooth, too drilled. He didn't telegraph. Sasuke lunged in, aiming to slice across Lee's shoulder. Lee slipped under it and caught Sasuke's wrist. Then Lee's other hand snapped up and struck Sasuke's forearm, hard. Sasuke's fingers spasmed. The kunai clattered to the floor. Lee stepped in close. Sasuke's eyes widened a fraction. Lee's legs swept behind Sasuke's knees. Sasuke went down again, this time flatter, harder. Lee didn't stop. He grabbed Sasuke's flak vest and hauled him up with one hand like Sasuke weighed nothing. Sasuke's Sharingan flared, anger and disbelief mixing in his face. Lee's voice turned solemn. I must show you my true power. Naruto's stomach tightened. Not because he feared Lee winning. Sasuke could handle losing a spar, but because Naruto recognized that tone. I'm about to do something stupid because I care too much. Lee's hands reached toward Sasuke's waist. Sasuke's body tensed instinctively, sensing danger. His feet kicked, trying to break Lee's grip, but Lee's hold was iron. Lee's stance shifted, preparing to launch upward, to wrap Sasuke, to spin. Naruto moved, not into the circle, not as an attacker. He flicked his wrist and sent a fan of shuriken into the air, tight, controlled, angled not at Lee's body but at the space around him. The wall behind, the floor near his feet, the air close enough to register his threat without drawing blood. The shuriken struck with sharp thunks, embedding in wood and plaster like warning bells. Lee froze for a split second, instinct overriding intent. His grip loosened, his body shifting to avoid an attack that wasn't meant to hit him. That split second broke the technique. Sasuke dropped back, stumbling free, chest heaving. The corridor went silent. Sasuke's head snapped toward Naruto, eyes blazing. What are you doing? Naruto didn't look apologetic. He looked calm, annoyingly calm. We're going to miss registration. Sasuke's anger sharpened. I had him. Naruto shrugged, like it was obvious. You'll beat him in the exam. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. He wanted to argue. He wanted to snap that Naruto didn't get to decide what Sasuke needed. But the word registration hit the practical part of him. Missing the sign-in would make this whole trip pointless. It would make them look like idiots. Worse, it would waste time. Sasuke exhaled sharply through his nose, forcing the rage down. Naruto continued smoothly, voice casual, giving Sasuke a way to accept it without losing face. Besides, what's the point of winning a hallway fight when the real fights are inside? Sasuke's jaw clenched, but the fire in his eyes dulled a fraction. He bent, snatched his kunai off the floor, and shoved it back into his pouch hard enough to make the metal clink. Sakura looked between them, tension still in her shoulders, then finally let out the breath she'd been holding. We really should go. Naruto nodded once. Yeah. He glanced back at Lee briefly. Lee stood frozen, fists clenched, eyes wide, not furious, but conflicted. Like Naruto had interrupted something sacred. Naruto didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just turned and jogged after his team. Sasuke moved first. Sakura followed. Naruto stayed slightly behind them again, keeping the formation tight as they sprinted down the corridor toward the registration room. Behind them, Lee took a step as if to chase, and a strong hand clamped down on his shoulder. A man with a bowl cut, thick eyebrows, and a green jumpsuit identical to Lee's appeared like he'd been there all along. His presence was so loud it felt like the hallway itself got brighter. Guy-sensei, Niji muttered from the side, sounding exhausted already. Guy's smile was dazzling. Too dazzling. The kind of smile that promised consequences. Lee, Guy said with cheerful horror. Were you about to use a forbidden technique in a meaningless hallway spar? Lee stiffened. Guy-sensei, Guy's fist descended like judgment. Thunk. Lee dropped to his knees, a bump swelling on his head instantly. Pain is the proof of youth, Guy declared, tears glittering dramatically at the corner of his eyes. But reckless youth must be corrected. Lee bowed low, voice muffled. I'm sorry. Guy's tone softened immediately, hand patting Lee's shoulder. You wish to test yourself. That is noble. But you must not throw your life away for pride. Lee nodded fiercely. Yes, Guy-sensei. Guy smiled again, brighter than before, and Lee smiled back, two matching lunatics in green, somehow making up within seconds. Niji looked away as if pretending not to know them. Tintin sighed like this was her normal life. Team 7 reached the registration door just in time to avoid looking like amateurs. They slowed only enough to not crash into it. Sasuke's shoulders were tight. Sakura was still half flustered. Naruto was breathing evenly, but his eyes were sharp, thinking. Sakura spoke first, quieter now. Lee, he's insane. Naruto nodded. Yeah. Sasuke's voice was flat. He was definitely strong. It's like he's trained like that his whole life. Naruto's gaze drifted back down the hallway, remembering what he'd seen. Those hands. The roughness. The faint scarring across knuckles and palms, like they'd been shredded and healed over and over. Training scars. The kind you didn't get from academy drills. The kind you got from devotion. He's been training extremely hard, Naruto said, tone more serious than usual. Those hands aren't normal. Sakura blinked, then frowned like she was replaying the image in her head. Yeah, I saw it too. Sasuke didn't deny it. That alone was an agreement. Naruto exhaled. We need to train harder. Sakura's eyes narrowed. We already are. Naruto's grin flickered, quick, sharp. Harder. Sasuke's eyes tightened, but not in disagreement. In challenge, we'll make Kakashi train us more. Sakura made a face. Good luck forcing him to do anything. Naruto's grin widened slightly. We'll figure it out. They pushed another door open, and Kakashi was standing there, leaning casually as if he'd been waiting for them the whole time. Like he didn't care. Like he hadn't been watching the clock. His visible eye curved in that lazy smile. Good. You all came. Sakura blinked. You were waiting? Kakashi shrugged. Only teams of 3 can take the exam. If one of you didn't show, the whole team would be disqualified. Sasuke scoffed. We know. Kakashi's eye shifted toward Naruto for half a second, measuring. Naruto just looked back with that calm, alert focus he'd developed. No prank. No loudness. Just readiness. Kakashi sighed, almost begrudging. And fine. I'll make training a little longer. Naruto's expression didn't change, but in his head he immediately thought, a little longer? Don't be late and call it longer. Sakura brightened. Sasuke gave the smallest nod. Kakashi stepped aside, gesturing them forward like a gatekeeper. Go. They entered through a second set of doors. The room beyond was packed. So many ninja that the air felt crowded with chakra, different villages, different scents, different presences stacked together. Conversations died and restarted in waves. Eyes turned toward the door like blades. Assessment hit them from every angle. Who are you? What are you? Can you be crushed? Naruto felt it like pressure against his skin. Sasuke's Sharingan was off now, but his posture was ready. Sakura swallowed, then steadied herself. Naruto took one slow breath, feeling the weights tug at his limbs like anchors. Then he stepped forward with his team into the sea of shinobi, letting the door close behind them. Sasuke, you're late. A joyful voice shouted, approaching Sasuke fast. Naruto turned fast enough to catch Ino wrapping her arms around Sasuke's neck. I haven't seen you for ages, so I've been waiting in excitement. Sasuke's face creased as he tried to pry the blonde girl off of him. Not that it was too hard. She wasn't all that strong. Get away from Sasuke, you pig. Sakura screamed. Naruto simply stared at this, watching it unfold in all its glory. He felt like a bowl of ramen would make it seem like he was in a theater. He'd never been to one before, but that's how he imagined it. Well, if it isn't Sakura, Ino said, now off of Sasuke. The two girls continued to bicker when Shikamaru and Choji arrived behind Naruto. You guys are taking this test too? Shikamaru said, yawning. Don't die. Choji was too busy to talk because he was eating food as always. Naruto gave them a wave while still watching the girls arguing. It's like watching cats fight. Naruto now wanted some of Choji's food. Found you. A loud voice barked from behind. Naruto recognized it immediately. Sakura and Ino finally stopped arguing, and so both Team 7 and Team 10 looked to the voice. It was obviously Kiba. Hinata and Shino were following behind him. Naruto locked eyes with Hinata and gave a wave and a smile. He'd missed training with the young Hyuga. Her posture also seemed better, straight like she'd gained a bit more confidence. All 9 rookies are taking the exam. I wonder how far we will get, Sasuke. Kiba said. We've done a lot of training since our mission together. We won't lose out. Sasuke scoffed. You're sure confident trying to compare yourself to me. Try beat Naruto first. Naruto elbowed Sasuke. Who are you lumping in with him? Naruto laughed a little. Kiba wanted to shout back, but for once he didn't. He wasn't sure how to act around Naruto anymore. He thought he could probably beat the blonde in a fight, but something about seeing him kill those bandits on the bridge left a sense of danger in his brain. Shikamaru jumped in on something Kiba said, however. You guys went on a mission together? Ino and Choji caught on after Shikamaru said that. Yeah, and we kicked, but Kiba was cut off mid-sentence. You guys should be more quiet. You guys are rookies, right? The 9 turned to look, and it was a white-haired man with glasses talking. I'm Kabuto, but you should look behind you. They turned around to see cold glares in their direction. Naruto had already felt all this because of his sensory training, but it was hardly a big deal. He was on guard, so if anything happened, then he wasn't going to be pushed over. Well, I can't blame you, so I'll help you out. He pulled out a deck of cards when they all looked back. These are ninja info cards. They have information about every ninja here. Kabuto first showed them the breakdown of ninja participating and which village they were from. The most was obviously the Leaf, and the Sand seemed to have a lot of ninja participating as well. Do you have information on individuals? Sasuke asked seriously. Kabuto nodded, but explained it may not be perfect. I want to see Gaara of the Sand and Rock Lee. Sasuke said. Naruto was confused. He looked at Sakura. Who's Gaara of the Sand? Sakura turned back. Sasuke got into a confrontation with him because his teammate attacked the 3rd Hokage's grandson. Naruto's eyes widened. They attacked Konohamaru? Sakura nodded. That surprised Naruto. Why would they do that when they were guests of the village? Kabuto placed the 2 cards down. Rock Lee, a first-timer like you guys, teammates Neji, Hyuga, and Tenten. He is a year older than you guys. His sensei says his taijutsu has improved greatly in this year, but the rest isn't impressive. He's done 40D rank missions and 12C rank missions. Gara of the Sand. I don't have much info on him. He has completed 8C ranks and 1B rank. That's all I know of. But the rumor that's scariest is he has come back from every mission without a scratch. Everyone collectively thought, this isn't going to be easy. Sasuke, you're late. The voice cut through the low roar of the exam hall like a kunai through paper, bright, familiar, and annoyingly cheerful. Naruto's head turned on instinct, not because the shout surprised him, but because the movement behind it did. Ino Yamanaka practically launched herself across the room, ponytail snapping behind her, and wrapped her arms around Sasuke's neck like she'd decided oxygen was optional for him. I haven't seen you for ages, she declared, squeezing tighter. So I've been waiting in excitement. Sasuke's face creased like someone had dropped something unpleasant into his drink. He tried to pry her off with the slow patience of a person who didn't want to waste energy, but it wasn't difficult. Ino might be confident, but she wasn't exactly strong enough to cling to someone who could uproot her with one annoyed shrug. Get away from Sasuke, you pig! Sakura screamed, the words leaving her mouth faster than her brain could stop them. Naruto just stared. There was a moment, pure, stupid theater, where the exam hall didn't feel like a gathering of future killers and more like a stage. He almost expected a spotlight to swing down onto the three of them. All it needed was a bowl of ramen in his hands, and he could have sworn he was watching a show he didn't pay for. He'd never been to a theater in his life, but this had to be close. Well, if it isn't Sakura, Ino said, finally releasing Sasuke with an exaggerated sigh and turning her attention like a blade redirected. Still chasing him, I see. Sakura bristled. At least I'm not throwing myself at him like a desperate. Ino's smile sharpened. Oh, and what exactly do you call screaming at me like you own him? They were off again, voices rising, hands gesturing. A few nearby genin glanced over, amused or irritated, and Naruto watched the argument bloom with the detached fascination of someone observing wild animals from behind glass. He didn't step in. He didn't need to. Some things were inevitable. A yawn drifted in behind him like a lazy cloud. You guys are taking this test too? Shikamaru's voice was half asleep, as always. He stood behind Naruto with Choji at his side, both of them looking like they'd wandered into the wrong building by accident. Shikamaru scratched the back of his head, eyes barely open. Don't die. Choji didn't say anything. He was too busy eating. The crunching alone was a statement. Naruto gave them a quick wave without taking his eyes off the girls, then leaned slightly toward Shikamaru with a grin that was more tired than cocky. It's like watching cats fight. Shikamaru's eyes flicked toward the argument, then away. What a drag. Naruto's gaze drifted to Choji's snacks for half a second, and he felt his stomach betray him with interest. He'd eaten earlier, but food was food. He almost asked. Almost. Then a voice barked from behind with enough volume to make several heads turn. Found you. Naruto recognized it immediately. Kiba's voice always sounded like it was charging toward you even when he was standing still. Sakura and Ino finally paused mid-bicker, as if the noise had slapped them, and the cluster of leaf rookies turned as one. Kiba strode up with that aggressive grin he always wore, like his personality had teeth. Shino Aburame followed behind him in his usual high-collared quiet, and Hinata Hyuga walked slightly to the side, hands held close to her chest like she wasn't sure what to do with them. Naruto's eyes found Hinata first without him meaning them to. He waved and smiled, simple and genuine. Hinata froze for a heartbeat, then lifted her hand in a tiny wave back. Her posture looked different. Straighter. Not loud. Hinata would never be loud, but more present. Like she'd decided she deserved to take up space. Naruto felt something warm in his chest, but didn't let his face show how much happiness he found in that one change. All 9 rookies are taking the exam, Kiba announced, glancing around like he was counting trophies. His eyes lingered on Sasuke with a competitive spark. I wonder how far we'll get, Sasuke. We've trained a lot since our mission together. We won't lose out. Sasuke scoffed like the sound had been stored in his lungs specifically for moments like this. You're sure confident trying to compare yourself to me. Try beat Naruto first. Naruto's elbow tapped Sasuke's side automatically, not hard, just enough to make a point. Who are you lumping me in with him for? He muttered with a laugh that was half amusement, half warning. Kiba's grin faltered. Just slightly. The old Kiba would have snapped back instantly. The old Kiba would have made it loud, but this time he didn't. He found himself at a loss for words. His gaze flicked toward Naruto, and there was something behind it that hadn't been there at the academy. Something cautious. Something that looked a lot like memory trying to bite him. Naruto didn't blame him. Team 8 had seen what happened on the bridge, had seen Naruto moving like a different person, eyes wrong, chakra roaring, mercenaries falling. Even if Kiba tried to laugh it off, instincts weren't jokes. Instincts were survival. Shikamaru cut in, curious despite himself. You guys went on a mission together? Ino and Choji perked up at that, even if Choji didn't stop eating. Kiba puffed up a little, glad for a new audience. Yeah, and we kicked. Quiet. The voice that interrupted wasn't loud, but it carried. Like the air itself decided to listen. All 9 rookies turned. A white-haired shinobi with glasses stood nearby, posture relaxed, expression mild. He looked older than them by a good few years, and he had the calm of someone who'd already seen the worst parts of shinobi life and learned to smile anyway. I'm Kabuto, he said, pushing his glasses up with one finger. And you should look behind you. They turned. Naruto didn't need to. He'd felt the shift in the room the moment the rookies gathered, like sharks circling once they smelled a splash. The exam hall was packed wall to wall with ninja from different villages, different ranks, different histories, and nothing brought out predatory curiosity like a group of loud first-timers. Cold glares pinned them. A few smirks. A few expressions that were blank in the way a blade was blank before it cut. Sakura's shoulders tightened. Ino's face stiffened. Kiba's grin shrank a little. Naruto stayed still, breathing steady. He didn't flare his chakra. He didn't posture. He just let his awareness settle, like he was standing in a storm and refusing to be blown over. He'd trained his mind for pressure. He'd trained his body to move when fear tried to freeze it. Sasuke's gaze narrowed, that familiar chill settling in. Kabuto let them stare long enough to feel the weight, then spoke again calmly. You're rookies, right? This kind of attention can get you singled out. If you don't want trouble, don't invite it. Kiba bristled. Naruto could feel the retort forming, but Kabuto's tone, gentle, almost kind, made it harder to bite back. Well, I can't blame you, Kabuto continued, and then his hand dipped into his pouch. He pulled out a deck of cards with a casual flick. So I'll help you out. He fanned the cards slightly, showing blank faces like ordinary playing cards. These are ninja info cards. They store information about the people here. Villages, mission history, skill sets, whatever I've gathered. Naruto's eyes narrowed a fraction, interest sparking. Information was power. Naruto had learned that the hard way. If someone was handing out information for free, he wouldn't refuse. Kabuto held up one card, chakra flickering through his fingers. The surface shimmered, and text rose like ink pulled out of water. A layout appeared, organized. First, Kabuto showed them a broad breakdown. How many teams from each village were participating? The leaf had the most, naturally, and the sand had brought more than Naruto expected. Mist and grass were present too, and a handful of smaller villages whose headbands Naruto didn't recognize immediately. Sakura leaned closer, eyes scanning. There are so many. Naruto's gaze moved across the room, suddenly seeing the exam hall differently. Not just faces, numbers. Not just teams, probabilities. Each village had their own agenda. Each team had their own strengths, their own secrets. Sasuke's voice cut in, serious. Do you have information on individuals? Kabuto nodded. It's not perfect. Some ninja keep their records clean on purpose. Others have rumors attached instead of facts. But yes, Sasuke didn't hesitate. Gaara of the Sand. And Rock Lee. Naruto blinked, a brief confusion cutting through his focus. He leaned toward Sakura. Who's Gaara of the Sand? Sakura's expression tightened, like she'd been trying not to bring it up. Sasuke got into a confrontation with him. One of Gaara's teammates attacked the Hokage's grandson. Naruto's eyes widened so fast it almost hurt. They attacked Konohamaru? Sakura nodded. A flare of anger sparked in Naruto's chest. Konohamaru was a brat, sure, but he was their brat. Attacking the Hokage's grandson in the village you were visiting wasn't just rude. It was a message. It was arrogance sharpened into violence. Kabuto placed 2 cards down between them, chakra flickering again. The first card showed Rock Lee. Kabuto read, tone matter of fact. Rock Lee, first-time participant. Teammates, Niji Hyuga, Tenten. 1 year older than you. His sensei claims his taijutsu has improved greatly this year, but his ninjutsu and jinjutsu are unimpressive. Naruto's mouth twitched. Unimpressive didn't match what he'd seen in the hallway. Kabuto continued, 40 D-rank missions. 12 C-ranks. Sasuke's eyes narrowed slightly, absorbing. Kabuto moved to the second card. Gaara of the Sand. Records are limited. Kabuto tapped the card. 8 C-ranks, 1 B-rank. That's all I have in official reports. Naruto frowned. That doesn't sound like much. Kabuto's gaze flicked up behind his glasses. The rumor is the important part. He returns from every mission without a scratch. Silence tightened around the rookies like a rope being pulled. Kiba's grin was gone now. Ino's mouth was slightly open as if she'd forgotten how to speak. Sakura swallowed. Even Sasuke's face hardened, that predatory focus shifting into something sharper. Naruto stared at the card, then at the room, and felt the exam hall change shape again. A person who came back without a scratch wasn't just strong. It meant fights didn't touch him. It meant people didn't reach him. Or it meant something reached them first. Naruto forced his breathing to stay even. He didn't like how much Gaara's rumor reminded him of things he didn't want to remember, of unstoppable force, of killing intent that made the world feel small. Then Kabuto sighed lightly, as if he'd completed his good deed. Anyway, just keep your voices down, and you'll. A blur of motion cut toward Kabuto from the side. Naruto's senses snapped tight. His muscles tensed before thought. A fist swung at Kabuto's face. Kabuto moved like water. He tilted his head just enough, stepping back half a pace, and the punch missed by centimeters. But the attack didn't stop. 2 more shinobi were behind the first. 3 in total, headbands unfamiliar, eyes hungry. Their movements were sharp, predatory, not random bullies. Coordinated. Kabuto's hand rose defensively, but Naruto noticed something odd. The first attacker's fingers didn't clench into a normal fist. He wore something on his arm, metal tubing, holes, vents. Naruto's stomach tightened. Sound. The attacker struck again. Kabuto dodged again, but this time there was a pulse in the air, an invisible Adar that wasn't made of chakra the way ninjutsu was, but something else. Pressure. Vibration. Kabuto's glasses cracked. The sound hit a fraction later like a hammer inside the skull. Naruto flinched, and for a split second the world tilted. It wasn't pain exactly, it was disorientation, like his inner ear had been grabbed and shaken. Kabuto didn't have time to react. The sound wave slammed into his chest and abdomen. Naruto heard it, heard the low thrumming impact like a drum struck underwater. Kabuto's body jerked. His breath left him in a violent cough, and he staggered back into the crowd. Then he vomited. Not a polite gag. A harsh, involuntary spill, the kind that came from internal damage rather than nausea. Kabuto's knees hit the floor, one hand catching himself, the other pressing hard into his stomach as if he could keep his organs from vibrating apart. Sakura's face went pale. Kiba's eyes widened, suddenly very aware that this wasn't the academy anymore. Sasuke's Sharingan flickered on instinct, eyes sharpening. Naruto moved one step forward, then stopped himself. He could jump in. He could throw a kunai. He could scatter shuriken and force distance. But this was a trap, not just the sound Genin attacking. This whole exam hall was watching. Any movement from the rookies could bring 10 other problems. Also, something else was happening. The air in the room shifted again, like a lid closing. A dozen figures appeared in the room with a suddenness that didn't feel like teleportation so much as inevitability. They dropped from rafters and door frames, stepped out from corners Naruto hadn't noticed, moved with the smooth coordination of trained adults who didn't need to announce themselves. Chunin, Tokubetsu Jonin. Proctors. The sound attackers froze mid-motion, suddenly aware that they'd bitten something bigger than them. A heavy voice cut through the hall. Enough. It was a voice that didn't need shouting to command obedience. It carried weight, authority sharpened into intimidation. A large man stepped forward, scarred face severe, bandana pulled tight, expression like stone carved into anger. His presence alone made the room feel colder. Naruto recognized him from a book, Marino Ibiki. The man's eyes swept the room like a blade scanning for weakness, and the crowd quieted until the only sounds were Kabuto's ragged breathing and the faint rustle of clothing. Ibiki's gaze landed on the sound Genin. If you're going to fight, do it in the second phase where it's expected. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. The sound attackers backed off slowly, expressions stiff. One of them clicked his tongue, irritation flashing in his eyes, but he didn't move again. Not with Ibiki watching. Kabuto pushed himself up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. His glasses were broken, one lens spiderwebbed. His expression stayed calm somehow, even while his body clearly wanted to fold. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Kabuto wasn't just some helpful older genin. He'd taken that hit and kept his composure like someone who'd been hurt worse before. Ibiki turned his attention outward. His gaze swept the room, stopping briefly on each cluster, each team, each individual, like he was weighing them. "You're all here for the Chunin exams," he said. "So listen carefully." He stepped forward, and the proctors behind him moved in unison, spreading around the room in a formation that felt less like crowd control and more like a net. "My name is Ibiki Marino," he continued, "and I will be the examiner for the first test." The room stayed silent. Naruto could feel the tension in Sakura's posture, the way Sasuke stood just a touch straighter, the way Kiba's confidence had shrunk into alertness. Hinata's gaze was downcast, but her hands were steady. Ibiki's eyes narrowed. "Before we begin, understand this. The first test is not designed to see how clever you are. It's designed to see what kind of shinobi you are." He paused just long enough for that to sink in. Then he jerked his chin toward the desks. "Sit." Chairs scraped. The room moved. Teams filed into rows, taking assigned seats. Naruto walked with Team 7, the three of them threading through the crowd as eyes followed them, some curious, some hostile, some indifferent. Naruto took his seat and let his senses widen again. He could feel the room now like a living thing. Too many chakras, too many intentions. A few were hidden deliberately. A few were sharp and loud. The Sand sibling sat not far away, and Naruto's skin prickled when his awareness brushed against them, especially the red-haired one. Gaara. He didn't look at them much. He didn't move much. He just sat there with a presence that felt heavy, like standing too close to a cliff edge. Naruto forced his focus back to the front. Ibiki stood at the teacher's desk like it belonged to him by right. Behind him, proctors moved down the aisles and placed stacks of papers on desks with the rhythm of executioners preparing a blade. "Here are the rules," Ibiki said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. "Each of you begins this test with 10 points. Naruto frowned slightly. 10 points. Not a lot. Ibiki continued. "This is a 1-hour exam. 10 questions. The questions will be difficult enough that most of you will not know the answers." A murmur threatened to rise. Ibiki's gaze snapped across the room, and the murmur died instantly. "That is intentional," he said, "because this test is not about what you know. It is about how you gather information under pressure." Naruto felt Sakura's posture stiffen beside him, like she'd already grasped what Ibiki meant. Sasuke's face didn't change, but Naruto could see the subtle tension in his jaw. Ibiki's finger tapped the desk once. "You are allowed to cheat." The room froze. Naruto blinked, sure he'd misheard. Ibiki's mouth didn't move into a smile, but his eyes held something like satisfaction. "However, if you are caught cheating, points will be deducted." He lifted one thick finger. "If you are caught once, you lose 2 points. A second finger. Caught twice, you lose 2 more." He let the numbers hang in the air like a noose. "And if you are caught cheating 5 times." Ibiki's voice dropped slightly, the room leaning into it without meaning to. "You will fail immediately." Naruto's mind began to build a picture, not just of a written test, but of surveillance, proctors watching, traps, hidden punishments. Ibiki's gaze sharpened. "And if any member of your team fails, the entire team fails." Sakura inhaled sharply. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That was the real blade. Team pressure. If one cracked, all cracked. If one got sloppy, the others paid. Ibiki's voice continued. "Additionally, you may choose to give up at any time. If you raise your hand and declare that you quit, you will leave the exam hall immediately." Naruto's stomach tightened. Quitting sounded simple. Too simple. Ibiki's eyes swept the room again. "But if you quit, your entire team quits." There it was. Naruto felt Sakura shift, the fear of responsibility running through her like electricity. Sasuke didn't react outwardly, but Naruto could feel the quiet intensity in him. Sasuke wasn't going to quit. Sasuke would rather die than quit. The danger wasn't Sasuke. The danger was someone else on a team cracking under the weight of everyone else's dreams. Ibiki leaned forward slightly. "Now, the 10th question." Naruto's eyes narrowed. There were 10 questions. Why emphasize the 10th? Ibiki's voice dropped again, drawing the room into a colder silence. "The 10th question will be given at the end of the hour. You will have a choice." Naruto felt something in his chest tighten. Ibiki continued. "Will be revealed at a later date." "Now," Ibiki said, voice returning to blunt authority, "if you understand the rules." He lifted his hand. Proctors moved down the aisles, placing the exam sheets face down on each desk. Naruto stared at the paper in front of him like it was a trap disguised as ink. His mind was already running through possibilities. How to gather answers without being seen, how to avoid getting caught, how to keep his team from making a mistake that dragged them all down. He remembered the sound attack, Kabuto vomiting, the reminder that violence could strike in an instant and still be called part of the test. He remembered Zabuza's voice in the mist. He remembered Haku's mask falling. He remembered that choking sensation of being too slow, too weak, too human. His fingers flexed slightly under the desk. He could cheat. He could use clones. But dispelling them in a room like this would be a mental bomb. He could try sensory tricks, but the room was crowded with chakra, too noisy. He could try to read lips, glance at papers, watch hand movements, watch who looked confident, watch who looked like they already knew. And he could also do something else, stay calm. Because panic made mistakes. Ibiki's eyes swept the room one last time, measuring. Then he spoke one final word, and it fell like a guillotine. Begin.